Janelle and welcome back to Rosery Apparel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing how to use smocking techniques to create this beautiful statement sleeve top. I recently shared how to smock fabric in another video, and today I'm going to be showing you how to put those new skills into practice to create this beautiful smocked design. This project is in no way a quick make. All up, I'm pretty sure it took me around 30 hours to complete, but in saying that, I thoroughly enjoyed the process, and it has literally been made up of only 3 rectangles of fabric, making it quite an easy project to do once you get the hang of the smocking techniques. So without further ado, let's get into it and let me show you how to make this top. Let's start with the part of this project that is by far going to take the longest amount of time, the smocking of the sleeves. For smocking, you're going to need some embroidery thread, and for my top, I'm using DMC cotton. And for the smocking pattern I'm showing in this video, you will need 3 different colors, and I think it looks really nice to use colors that work together with your fabric, but kind of contrast at the same time. So for example, I'm using a similar burnt orange color that can also be found in the floral print. And I'm using a peachy toned and white embroidery cotton that contrast with the fabric a little bit, but still work nicely all together. We're going to be making the sleeves out of 2 rectangles of fabric. To figure out the measurements of the rectangles, measure your arm and times this measurement by 3. For example, my measurement was 28 centimeters or 11 inches, which once times by 3 is 84 centimeters or 33 inches. Then measure out how long you'd like your sleeve to be, adding 4 to 5 centimeters or about 2 inches for hemming. I decided to make mine 40 centimeters or 15 3/4 inches long. Once you've figured out the measurements for your own sleeve rectangles, cut 2 out in your fabric. And while I'm cutting out my rectangles, now would probably be a good time to talk about the sponsor of this video, LDH Scissors. If you've been watching my videos for a little while now, then you will totally recognize my trusty LDH fabric scissors that I have been using for a little over 2 years now. And when I say I use these scissors, I mean I use them. I use these at least twice a week, if not more, and these are just as sharp and as lovely to use as the very first day I got them. What I really love about these scissors is not only do they have a beautiful classic look to them, but the quality of them is incredible. They feel solid but aren't heavy or uncomfortable to handle at all. They also look and feel as though they could have been around for 100 years in a good way, and also feel like they're going to be around for at least another 100 years or more as well. Oh, and the sound, it kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. These scissors have a very, very satisfying cutting sound. They are a female and family owned business based in Toronto, Canada, and as well as fabric scissors, they also have a whole range of different products including rotary cutters, thread snips, and gift sets. So if you'd like to treat yourself or someone you love to a quality pair of fabric scissors, then I definitely recommend you go and check out LDH Scissors. And if you use the code Janelle at checkout, you can receive 10% off your order. Thanks so much LDH Scissors for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the tutorial. Once your sleeve rectangles are cut out, it's now time to prepare them for smocking. And a fair warning, this part is very time consuming, but a little bit therapeutic at the same time. If you have a fabric pleater machine, you can use that to pleat up your fabric for smocking, but if you're like me and don't have one of those, we're going to need to draw a series of dots directly onto the back of the fabric with a water erasable pen or some tailor's chalk. The dots are going to be spaced 1/8 of an inch apart and drawn up in rows that are spaced 1/4 of an inch apart. Keep drawing out these rows of dots along the entire width of your fabric, leaving approximately 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch at both ends for seam allowance until you have 11 rows of dots all up. Then, using some ordinary machine thread in a colour that you're definitely going to be able to notice, start stitching in and out of each dot along each row, securely knotting the end of the thread so that it doesn't slip through. Keep repeating this until you have a length of thread stitched into each of the dot rows, which once done will look like this. Gently push the fabric along the rows of thread, being very careful not to accidentally snap any of the threads. Once the fabric has been gathered up along the stitching, it will now be folded into tight pleats like this. Then secure the threads in place by tying up the other end into pairs. The last 3 rows will be tied up together. And with that finally done, it's time to start the actual smocking. To make this pattern for the sleeve, we're going to be using a combination of cable stitches and wave stitches, both of which I've shared how to do in a previous video, which I'll have linked below so you can check that out. But basically, using the second row of blue stitches as a guide, stitch a row of cable stitches in your first embroidery thread colour. Then using your second colour, stitch another row of cable stitching, this time along the third row of blue stitches. Now to change it up a little bit, we're going to stitch a row of wave stitches from the 4th row of the blue stitches to the 5th row of the blue stitches using your third chosen colour. Again, I've shared how to do a wave stitch in detail in my previous video. Then we're going to repeat the wave stitch for the next row, this time stitching from the 5th to the 6th row of blue thread stitches and using colour number 1 again, which once stitched should sit nicely below the previous wave stitch that we just made. And now we are officially halfway through the smocking pattern. Next, we need to repeat the entire pattern, but this time it will be flipped or opposite what we have just previously stitched. Starting with a row of wave stitches that will be stitched from the 7th blue thread row back up to the 6th, again in colour number 1. Then stitch a row of wave stitches in colour number 3 from the 8th blue thread to the 7th. Then now back to cable stitching along blue thread row number 9, this time in colour 2, and finish off the pattern along row 10 of the blue thread with the final row of cable stitching in colour 1. The 1st and 11th row of blue stitching help to keep the fabric pleats in place and kind of act as a stay stitching. Once the smocking pattern is complete, we can now remove all of the blue threads, and you will then need to repeat this whole time-consuming but very satisfying process again for the second sleeve. Yes, it takes a long time, but just look how beautiful these smocked sleeves are looking. Next, with right sides together, fold the sleeves in half and stitch them together along the sides like this. After stitching each seam, I like to overlock the raw edges to prevent the fabric from fraying, and while I'm at it, I also overlock the bottom edge of the sleeve. If you don't have an overlocker, you can use the zigzag stitch of your sewing machine instead. Next, fold and press the overlocked edge in by about 1 centimeter or half an inch, and stitch the folded edge in place. Repeat this for the second sleeve. Next, measure a piece of elastic around your shoulder and cut 2 pieces out at this measurement. You can use any width of elastic you'd like, but for my top I'm using some thin 6mm wide elastic. Fold and press the top edge of the sleeve in twice, enclosing the raw edge of the fabric onto the inside, and make sure to fold over enough fabric to comfortably cover your elastic width. Then stitch the folded edges in place, leaving a small opening to be able to thread the elastic through. Next, use a safety pin or a bodkin to thread the elastic into the casing we just made. Once the elastic has been threaded all of the way through, stitch the 2 ends of the elastic together with a zigzag stitch, and then sew the opening closed. and your two amazing Smocked statement sleeves are complete. Now to make the body of the top to actually attach the sleeves to. Like the sleeves, the body of the top is also going to be made up of a rectangle of fabric, and to figure out the measurements for the rectangle, measure along your bust very tightly and then times this measurement by 2. For example, my bust measured tightly is 75 centimeters or 29.5 inches, and once that measurement is times by 2, my rectangle will be 150 centimeters or 59 inches. Then for the length, measure out how long you'd like your top to be, adding 4 to 5 centimeters or about 2 inches for hemming. For my top, I made my rectangle 38 centimeters or 15 inches long. Once you've figured out the measurements for your own rectangle, cut it out in your fabric. Once cut, fold your rectangle in half with right sides together and stitch it together like this. Then hem both raw edges of the fabric rectangle, enclosing all of the raw edges to the inside. Next, we're going to add some shirring to the top in a fun kind of pattern by spacing out the rows of shirring, and here's a guide on how I spaced out mine. To shirr the fabric, you will need to hand wind some shirring elastic onto a bobbin and change up your sewing machine settings slightly. For my machine, I set the stitch length to 3.5 when it's usually 2.5 and the tension to 6 when it's usually 4. But it's honestly different for every single machine, and I find just having to play with the tension and testing it out on a bit of scrap fabric is the best way to figure out exactly what settings are best for your machine. Then start stitching the rows of shirring directly onto your fabric. You can mark out the spacing of the rows where you'll be stitching out onto your fabric with a water erasable pen or some tailor's chalk, or you can simply use the previous row of stitching as a guide and line your presser foot up against it, which is what I decided to do. As you stitch the shirring elastic into the fabric starts to gather up and become stretchy. Once again, this process does take a little bit of time, but it is very satisfying to watch it all come together. Once all of your shirring rows have been stitched, use the steam of your iron to shrink up the shirring elastic ever so slightly, and then give your stitching a good press. And your rectangle of fabric should now be nicely gathered up in a cute shirring pattern like this. Now for the very last step, attaching the sleeves. Take one of the sleeves and match up the seam of the sleeve with the side seam of the top. Then pin the sleeve with the elastic stretched out to the top. And stitch the sleeve a good 15 centimeters or 6 inches to both the front and the back of the top like this. Repeat this for the second sleeve. And your adorable Smocked statement sleeve top is complete. So, how does it look? So I hope you enjoyed this video and that you're now inspired to give smocking a try for yourself. It is a very long process, but it's also a very fun process. I just had so much fun making this garment and it was honestly very therapeutic for me. And the end result is just so special. Like, I just can't get over how lovely these sleeves have turned out, and I think it was definitely worth all of the effort. If you do have a go at making a top just like this one, then I would love to see it. So be sure to tag me at Rosery Apparel when you share your photos on Instagram. And if you did enjoy this video or found it helpful, then I would really appreciate it if you could give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more sewing type videos like this one. Have a lovely day and thanks for watching!